Hello, dear English teachers in Peru and teachers around the world. As you already know, I'm Mariela Condorena, and welcome again to today's webinar. The topic is active learning in the learning process. So today we are going to learn more about the active learning approach. Okay, teachers, now we are going to continue with with these invitations. Please remember that you can follow us on our network. We have our Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, YouTube, TikTok. Please join us. And now we are going to remember some instructions that you have to consider in order to participate in today's webinar. So first, remember that please type your questions in the comment sections on the YouTube chat. The answer to your questions and comments will be replied by our guest speaker at the end of the webinar in the question time section. And some of the most important instruction is this. When finishing the webinar, we will share a link for you to have access to the exit ticket, which will be available for 15 minutes. Okay, so pay attention, please, teachers. And now it's time to know our guest speaker. So it's here, Mr. David Cuadros. Could you introduce him, please? Hello, David. Are you there? Yes?
Hello, everybody. Hello, well, today we will have, well, I have the opportunity to introduce Mr. Julio Valladares. He's going to talk about active learning in learning process. Mr. Julio Valladares holds an MA in TFL and bachelor's degree in education. He also holds a diploma in competencias directivas from the Business School of Universidad de Piura, PAD, and a diploma in critical thinking by the University of Oregon. He has been a teacher of English for more than 30 years, and he has worked for Britannico, Richmond, Camelon as the teacher and teacher trainer. He has delivered academic lectures in different places in Peru and in Bolivia, Mexico, China, and USA. He is currently working for Universidad de Piura. He is in charge of the teacher development unit of the language school, center manager for Cambridge exam, and also the academic coordinator of the MA in TFL program offered by Universidad de Piura and Funivar. Welcome, Mr. Valladares. We are all ears.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David, for the presentation. And now I'm going to switch to our presentation today. Well, my name is Julio. I'm also a teacher of English, as you have already heard, and I'm here to share some ideas on active learning so we can refresh some ideas. And the point of this webinar also is to get us to reflect. So our reflection on what we understand and how we understand active learning in the learning process. Now, so everybody talks about the typical phrases nowadays, active learning, we keep on learning, and so on. But how can we apply this in our own teaching learning process? Now, sometimes we just know it, how to apply it in the teaching process, but what about the learning process? And we tend to leave out the learning process. And I think we know that the learning and the teaching, they go together hand in hand. Yes. So the first one, it says, what is active learning? What is active learning? And I put a picture of the during the COVID time picture, very well connected now when we had our students on the other side of the screen. Then I wondered, what about active learning in that teaching learning context? No, is it possible? And the question then came back to me and said, is it possible in our face-to-face classes? How do we understand by active learning? Do we need active teaching? So what is active learning? That's a question that we maybe now you can say, okay, Julio, what do you understand by active learning? So let's see. According to Bowell and Eisen, they describe active learning strategies as instructional activities involving the students in doing things and thinking about what they are doing. Doing things and thinking about what they are doing. Okay, if you're talking about, if we're doing a reading activity, yes, we're doing a reading activity with our students. So think about what we are doing. Why are we reading? What for? Yes, but so okay, Julio, to develop reading skills. All right, but what else? What are we gaining by having our students, or getting our students to read something? Yes. To learn English, to expand vocabulary, to learn about culture, to increase idiomatic expressions, to review, to refresh some vocabulary. So there are different reasons for that. And we need to get our students to think about that. That's active learning. That's the core of active learning. Thinking about what I'm doing, thinking about why am I doing it, thinking about the purpose of the activities I have with my students, or getting my students to think about what they're doing. Why? Because that gives them a purpose for learning. Because maybe, and that doesn't, sometimes when we talk about active learning and we say, wow, but I teach in public schools and we have classes of 40 students and we have only 1 hour or 2 hours a week. Active learning can happen in any teaching learning context. Yes. It's just a matter of thinking about how can we develop those strategies, develop those instructions, so active learning happens in the teaching learning process with our students. It's always that idea that we have. Now we block ourselves and we say, no, I have 40 students, Julio, whatever you're saying now, I'm not able to do it. How do you know if you have never tried it? Or we have to cover the book, the textbook, and my principal obliges me to do that. And how can I? It's possible to do it with what you've got, with what you've got. Yes. So active learning gives you the idea of creating significant learning experiences. Significant learning experiences. What do we understand by significant? The idea of meaningful, the idea of getting your students to live what they are learning. Yes. It's better for them to draw an apple and paint it in red than just to show a picture of an apple, a red apple. You see the difference there? But you can say, but Julio, we are wasting time. It's just faster to just show the picture, of course. And it's good. I'm not saying it's wrong, but active learning is that, just transforming that, I would say, more passive, simple activity than just showing a picture of a red apple to an active activity, growing an apple, and then get your students to paint it in red. That's a very simple and, how can I say, basic example of active learning. Imagine what you can do when your students get to a higher level. So deep think builds upon, this is another researcher there. Yes. He describes a holistic view of active learning and includes components such as information and ideas, experience, and reflective dialogue. Information. Okay, now we're going to talk about fruits. Okay, fruits. Do you eat fruit? No. But of course, if you just got active learning, say, yes, fruit is uncountable, but then fruit sometimes is possible because it's like, oh, yes, we're talking about liquid, but you know, liquids is uncountable, but sometimes you can have 2 coffees because when you're in the context of a restaurant, and imagine the amount of information you give to your students. Think about the quality and the quantity of information you give your students. Think about the ideas you want your students to develop. Think about the experience you're going to give them. And think about the reflective dialogue. Reflective dialogue. So active learning is not just something as simple as just getting them to do something and drawing and singing and watching a video and reacting to that video. It's more than that. There's a philosophy working behind active learning. And that's why I say, excuse me, reflective dialogue. Yes. So what do you understand by reflective dialogue? What do you understand by reflective dialogue? No. So it's just the dialogue that you do with your teacher. Yes. It's something like, it's like, oh, I'm going to start like, I don't know, doing some yoga teaching, like reflective dialogue. I'm going to talk to myself. Is that something like that? So reflective dialogue is a discussion, no? Used in the classroom to build community, to expand the capacity of listening, and to foster individual reflection. Nowadays, reflection is something that should be increasing in the teaching learning field. Reflection implies sharing. Reflection implies thinking to yourself and then sharing those thoughts and learning from those thoughts and from the sharing you've done with your peers, could be among teachers. Yes. So reflective dialogue involves discussion, to do some reflection, and transformation. So what did I learn from here? Why did we do this? No? Or maybe if we're talking about teachers, no, when we prepare a lesson and we think, okay, this lesson was great, but why there wasn't any learning? The teaching was okay, the teaching was great, the lesson planning was excellent, but then why there wasn't any learning? What is our first reaction? The students. The students. No, they don't pay attention. We only have 1 hour, and that's not enough. The coordinator, no, Julio, that he didn't say anything about it in the webinars. But what about me, the teacher? What about my student? I mean, how do you know your student? I mean, ask your students. That's reflective. Ask your students, did you like it? Why? Why not? Let them write something. Let them share what they think about the activity you've done with them. Yes, and that fosters that kind of reflective dialogue I'm talking about. Yes. So the idea of conducting reflective dialogue, the teacher steps back and just moderates. Steps back. So unfortunately, that's so difficult for us teachers because we like to be the center. And sometimes we need to be the center. Imagine a class of 40, 45 students. We need to be the center, but we should step back from time to time. It's just 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and just moderate to make sure that all participants, they have the chance to share their thoughts and to keep a discussion focused on an established topic, idea of inquiry. Yes. Okay, let's talk about, now we're going to talk about, I don't know, colors. A very simple lesson for basic level for kids. Color. Ask your children, what color you like? Blue, yellow, why? Maybe you say, Julio, children, they cannot say that. I mean, they cannot express themselves in English, okay? Maybe they say in Spanish. That's great. You're fostering that reflective dialogue. Maybe if you're teaching higher primary, low secondary, where the level is higher, then maybe you can now get your students to think and say it and express it in English. Why? Because that makes your students be involved in the process of teaching learning. Then that makes them feel involved and make them not only feel, but get involved in what they are learning. Or in why, maybe they can realize they didn't learn that because of X, Y, or Z reason. And then they can let you know. So you really know the reasons for the learning or the reasons for the not learning. And that is this kind of dialogue. Yes, maybe what now you may be thinking now, what kind of webinar this is? No. This is the idea of what goes behind the practical thing. What's behind whatever I do in class? What's going to happen? So we're going to think about what's behind that. Obviously, we'll be given some practical ideas, like the colors, like drawing an apple. First, they draw, or maybe get them to draw the fruit they like. And then ask them, do you have that fruit at home? Can you show it if you're working online? Or can you bring the fruit that you like next class? And then draw it. So I bring a banana, I draw a banana, and I paint it in yellow. Yes, this is a yellow banana. And this is a red apple. Or maybe this is an apple, and this is a banana, if you want to make it more grammar-oriented. If you want to make it more grammar-oriented, okay, an apple, a banana, but it's a yellow apple, and this is a red. Sorry, a yellow apple, that's impossible, no? This is a red banana, and this is a yellow. I'm getting confused. So you can ask your students, say, no, teacher, that's wrong. This is a red banana. No. Okay. So you start working, and they are engaged. They are actively involved in the lesson. You're not the one who is at the center. You're not the one who is always telling everything. They are the ones, because they are actively participating in the class. And it's not only one-on-one, because usually we say, okay, Mariela, please, what is this? Oh, this is an apple. And what color? A red apple. Okay, and the rest of them, what are they doing? Listening to Mariela, obviously, yes. But maybe I'm completely disconnected. And then when they ask me, no, they ask, Jessica, what about you? Huh? What? But if you do that kind of activity where you get all the class involved, they feel that they belong to that part of the teaching learning process, no? And they reflect, and then you can ask them, did you like it? Yes, teacher. No, teacher. Why? No, this is the metacognitive process too, no? So when you have the happy face, like neutral face, and the sad face, but it's not just a matter of ticking, tick, tick, tick. It's a matter of thinking. Why do you put a happy face? Why do you put a sad face? Why? And then you can say, but maybe Julio, they are so young. Yes. Or they are so basic level students. Yes, but they always have something to say. Why not? Why not involve your students in that sense? So what does active learning mean to you? What does active learning mean to you? Yes. So I would like to read some of your ideas. Can I give you a minute so you can type it in the chat? Yes, what does active learning mean to you? Like 3 or 4 words. Somebody? Carlos has an interesting question. How can we develop a reflective dialogue in groups? But ideas, can you write in the chat of the? No ideas? No active learning here. What's going on? Nobody has any idea here to share? So Gladys says the students have to be involved, not to participate in the process of sharing knowledge. Yes, the idea. No, you getting students involved. Thank you, Jenny. No, Roxana is active participation by different strategies. That's good. Janet, when the students do activities for learning. Jaime, active learning is what you're doing when we're learning and questioning ourselves. Yes, that's it. No, Judith, action and movement. To manipulate, to exchange ideas, giving them a list of words, and the students can change them in the dialogue. Okay. So you have ideas. Be aware, or being aware of what they do. Being aware, interesting word there. Yes, thank you, Carlos. Right, Raj said interested, engaged in learning, curiosity. That's it, curious, no, to find information. Foster curiosity. Curiosity is the fountain of knowledge. Yes. The students being aware of the activity they are doing, that's it. Mario, active learning is an approach to instruction that involves actively engaging the students with the course, but that's Miguel Pino is other level, huh? That's great, no? Through discussion, problem solving, case studies, role plays, and other methods. Yes. So wow, thank you for a lot of participation, discussion, problem solving. Is active learning creates the space to reflect. Yes, projects, yes, active activities in order to use the language. So thank you. That's active learning is all you have said. But I get with one thing, no, being aware of what you're doing. I mean, our students. And reflect. At the end of the class, instead of just going for the metacognitive ideas of like, didn't like, and why, or what I would like to do, is reflect. Why I liked it, why I didn't like it. And share it with your maybe somebody said, well, how can we do it in groups? Get them in groups and among the students, share their ideas. And then come up with one single group idea and then share it with everybody else and see what happens. See what happens. Yes. Active learning is, those are some ideas. No? An active undertaking which requires commitment. Yes, commitment. face-to-face or online learning. That's what happened in online learning. Yes, when we were thrown up, no, we were thrown up into the deep end of the pool. Remember? Wow, commitment. The students, were they really committed? That was a big question that I asked myself. And then I asked, am I committed, or was I committed? Well, I asked myself, am I committed to this? It was difficult for me. Imagine for students. Yes, and commitment for learning. That's why, what for? Am I really learning? Yes, commitment, active. Why? Because as you mentioned, yes, Maria, it means engagement. Yes, engage. You have to be engaged. Our learners have to be engaged, motivated too. Yes. Remember, motivation is not the same as engagement. Being engaged is just part of the motivation, is like a long time of engagement. Motivation is for the whole process. Engagement is just ping, 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 points in the process. Yes, some students can be engaged in one activity, but not really motivated to learn. Yes, so commitment. Are your students committed to do well in your English class? To do well in your, to participate in your English class? To sit and follow what your teaching requires them to do? So how do you know? Again, because they get a 20 in the exam? That's another point. Yes, my students are learning because all of them get 20 in the exam. But what kind of exam are you doing with them? What kind of assessment are you taking, getting your students into? So, active learning, another idea, is helping students to be responsible for their own learning. So, as you can see, active learning goes beyond the group work, beyond the strictly speaking, of the activities we can do in class. Yes. So commitment, being responsible for their own learning. How do you achieve those objectives that active learning requires or involves? Responsible. Are they responsible for their own learning? What do you do in order to foster that responsibility? And if you may have noticed, I'm always repeating fostering, because you're not going to impose. You're not going to get into your class and say, now you are going to be active learners. Now you have to be committed and you have to be responsible. It's a process. It takes time. It takes understanding. You have to be sympathetic towards your students, because not everybody is the same. Not everybody learns at the same pace. Not always learning takes place in all our classes. But if we get our students to be committed to what we do in class, or what they do in class, or what they are responsible for their own learning. So if you give them homework, what kind of homework you're going to give them so they feel committed to doing that? And they're responsible for that. They need to know that it's also part of their responsibility. And it doesn't mean that you have to do lots of homework and they have to do it. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Active learning is getting students to learn more effectively by being active participants, not passive learners. It's like now, for example, I wish we were everybody in front of each other, and looking at our faces and talking about and getting into breakout rooms and discussing and then coming back to the main room and sharing our ideas, because you would be more active. Yes. But now we are here. So how can we be How can we get our students to learn more effectively? By being active participants. If we're in class, I gave you that simple example. Bring the fruit that you like. Paint it. Paint it the color you like. Maybe somebody can paint, I don't know, an apple, a blue apple. And you're not going to say, no, an apple is red or green, but it's not blue. Are you crazy? Okay. Ask the student, Julio, why did you paint the blue, the apple blue? Oh, because of the, so you listen to that student, and the student feels like being listened and feels that he's participating actively in the class. It's part of the lesson, it's part of that flow of lesson. It's not just part of the teacher, part of the textbook the teacher is using. Yes. So when they are doing I don't know, a dialogue, they're working in pairs, for example. Now you know, this is a very old exercise, no? And they say, okay, now imagine that you practice the dialogue, but angry. You're angry and you are hungry. Hungry? How can I practice a dialogue hungry? Let them invent. Let them be responsible for their own learning. You don't have to give them everything. You don't have to give them everything. Yes? They need to get involved. Active learning is taking into account the idea. Not everybody knows the typical learning styles. No, we're going to see the typical learning style picture, and the one that we've been using for decades. No, I think now there are more learning styles, but we always use the main. I think there are 3 or 4. Yes, but yeah, we should take into account that we do not learn in the same way. Yes, we do not learn the same way. And sometimes we teach, not sometimes, very often, we teach the way we learned. But I learned repeating 100 times, but I learned by reading, but I like teaching grammar because but maybe nowadays students, they don't need to spend half an hour learning a grammar point. Yes, they can learn a grammar point, but just by using different activities, strategies, getting them involved in the process. They are learning grammar, yes, but not the way you learned it, where the teacher was just in front of you, explaining and giving examples. Okay, now do the example and come to the board and write the example. And is it okay? Yes, no. Or when the typical, not the present perfect, say for and since. Why do you use for here? Teacher, because what do you use since here? Oh, yes, okay, all right, we finish. My question is, were your students actively involved in that process? No. They were passive recipients of all the knowledge you're giving them. But we think that we are the great teachers because we give that knowledge. Okay, but what do your students do with that knowledge? That's the question you should ask yourselves. Do they use it well? Do they remember that knowledge? I mean, how to use it the following class? What if they don't? What if they continue committing those mistakes? Whose fault is that? Okay, I'm not going to say whose fault because that's kind of going against myself as a teacher. But what do we need to know in order to overcome that? Where should we focus on in order to overcome that problem? So, okay, let's make it more active, that process. I'm going to repeat my lesson, but in a more active way. I'm going to get my students more involved in the process. Get them to investigate important things for next class. Get them to prepare the grammar explanation. I get them to come up with the use. I get them to come up with their own examples. I get them to share their own examples, 4 scenes. And get them to sort out their own problems among themselves. And then when you're walking around the groups and taking notes of the mistakes or the problems they have, working out together, everybody is actively engaged in the process of teaching, learning. So you are fostering commitment. You are making them being responsible for their own learning. Yes, they are active participants, and you are just, here you are. Now, if you are visual, they go to YouTube, and if you are like auditory, maybe they can, the video, and they listen and they pay attention to the words. Maybe they draw, they summarize whatever they researched into 2 or 3 or 4 lines, and then they share it. Yes. Instead of spending half an hour explaining a grammar point with a great lesson planning, but then the students at the end of the class is the typical, no? ¿Qué dijo el gordo? We don't understand. And then we leave the class thinking that they have learned. Some of them may, but what about the others? And then you ask yourselves, as a teacher, say, the following class, why they still continue not getting it right, no? If it's 4 scenes. Those are, I was going to say, common learning styles, no? The visual, the auditory, the tactile, and the kinesthetic. Now they say that there are more, yes. But those are the most common ones, like the skills, no? Reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And we know there are more skills nowadays, yes? But if we take into account those learning styles, I mean, do we take those learning styles into account? When we are explaining a grammar point and we just talk and talk and talk like I am doing now, unfortunately, am I reaching to all these students what I'm going to do? Yes. Like Carlos Juli says, always keep on monitoring when we can monitor. And then what else, Carlos? What else can we do after monitoring, after checking what's going on in class? What else can we do? How can I, if I have one lesson, how can I think of activities that the visual, the auditory, the tactile, and kinesthetic type of learners get involved, but actively? We know that we have a little bit of everything. It's not like if I am visual, I'm visual and that's it. I'm not auditory, no, we have from everything, but there is one that is predominant. There's one that is predominant. Like I learned I can read, and when I was at university, what I did was reading aloud. I need to read aloud. I need to hear my voice from whatever I'm reading, even when I'm reading for pleasure. When I'm watching television, I've listened to, I heard some expressions that because of the pronunciation, and I repeated it now. So I think I'm an auditory learner, but I'm also visual, obviously. I need to see it. No? Some people need to draw. And tactile doesn't mean that you have to touch everything. If you draw, you're a tactile kind of learner. So what does being a visual learning imply? Yes, like pictures and graphs, like instructions demonstrated, not just spoken. Tends to be quiet. Tends to be quiet. Tends to be neat and orderly. That's why tends. Yeah. Remembers words by writing them out. So why am I telling you this? Because if we want to design activities in which our students are going to be actively involved, we need to know what sort of activities we can devise. We need to know what sort of instructions we have to give. So we can sometimes go for the visual learning, sometimes go for the auditory learning, sometimes go for the tactile one, and sometimes go for the kinesthetic. You know? So if they have to draw, if they have to watch a video, if they have to. And if you're a visual learner and you tend to be quiet, then yeah, okay, maybe who is kind of a quiet learner, a visual learner, so tends to be quiet. It doesn't mean that he's not going to speak. Maybe tends to be quiet. So maybe he can just point out, maybe he can just prepare the writing part of the activity. You know, relates to the world through his or her eyes. So the typical, no, when we're telling little kids, not telling a tale. No, once upon a time there was a wolf, and you do everything, but you don't put any pictures. Or when you're teaching sounds or onomatopoeic sounds. No, so a dog, and the dog goes woof woof. No, in Spanish is wow wow, obviously, woof woof. And then if it's visual, I say, well, okay. But if I show a picture of a dog barking, no, and maybe one in Spanish and one in English, no, the visual learner will realize immediately. Also the auditory one. Maybe the auditory doesn't need a picture, but the visual one does. So that's much better, yes? Auditory learner likes group work, likes to sing, talk, hum, may not perform well on written tests, remembers through listening and discussion, is a good group leader, relates to the world through his or her ears. So again, auditory, visual. Say, Julio, yeah, I know, yeah, but do you know your students? Do you know your learners? And that's the point. Do you know them? Yes, are they auditory, are they visual? What are they like? What are they like? Do you know your students? Yes. So I'm telling you this so you can reflect on what happens in your class, what happens with your students. Why? Because it's going to facilitate the way you're going to prepare your activities so they can be actively involved. He is a tactile learner, yes, understands through touch, may have difficulty paying attention, needs to hear instructions repeated, relies on physical and material surroundings to learn, physical and material surroundings to learn. Do you have that in class? Likes arts and crafts. May have difficulty in staying still. So do you have that kind of students? For example, young kids, they tend to be tactile learner. When you're teaching kids, I don't know how many of you teach little kids, but may have difficulty paying attention. Nowadays, because of the COVID, even university students, they have become kind of tactile learner because, well, everybody's touching the clicks, the key on the computer, no? But now they don't have keys, so they don't know what to do with their hands. University students, imagine kids. I suppose you have already experienced that. Nowadays, they're coming back to what they had. But if you're teaching first graders, second graders, secondary, they have never had that experience of writing. They've been working with the computer, just clicking. From clicking to writing. So those learners are really struggling nowadays, no? May have difficulty staying still, and nowadays we know that even if they are not tactile learners, the learners have a very, very short span of attention. So what do you do? How can you get them getting them engaged in the activities? If you are these kind of teachers who spend half an hour or 45 minutes teaching grammar, do you think your students are going to be engaged in your lesson? And you say, yes, Julio, because I'm a great teacher. Okay, I accept that, but how do you know? How do you prove this to you, sir, to yourself, not to me, to yourselves? How do you prove that you are, yeah, I know you are a great teacher, but how do you know that your students are really learning from what you or whatever you're teaching them? And learning, when we talk about English, learning is not only learning about the language, it's using the language. Because you don't learn English just to get a 20 in the exam. You teach it so that it can be a tool for their future. English is becoming an important tool for students, for job, for the future. And this is good to us, teachers. Because whether you're teaching face-to-face or online, teachers are needed. Obviously, we need to be prepared. We need to change the way we teach. We need to adapt. And we also need to be active teachers in order to foster active learning. Kinesthetic needs quiet periods for specific tasks. Sometimes when we go into the class and say, okay, all right, Jaime, please answer the question. I say, Jaime said, what? And we haven't given them any time to process whatever they have to process. Learns through TPR activities, yes. Often has good coordination. Likes to complete tasks in a position other than sitting. So maybe standing up, maybe going to another friend's place and talking about that. Relates to the world through physical activity. So remember the example I gave you when the students have to bring an apple or bring a banana or bring the fruit they like. And then they have to draw, and then they have to paint it the color they like it. And maybe they have to show it to other peers in the class. And I say, oh, my banana is yellow bananas, and the other yellow banana here, get together all the yellow bananas. Any other color, green bananas. So you're involving everybody, all the types of learners there, the visual ones, the auditory ones, the tactile ones, and kinesthetic ones. And they are actively engaged in the class. 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes in the class. And then you can go back to the usual way of teaching, learning you have. But you're fostering active learning in that class. It's a very simple activity. Yes? You want to make it more complex? Make it more complex. Along, depending on the level of your students. Or maybe you want to make it more challenging to your students. That's also another way. Challenge your students to do something better. Challenge. Not everything has to be by the book. Not everything has to be to the letter. The book is also a tool. Or the Padlet, or the Kahoot, or Canvas, or Google. It's just tool. It's what you do with that tool, or how you use that tool with your students, or how do your students use that tool in order to learn. That's the thing that matters. in this teaching learning process. Because if not, you are just fostering the clickers. Click, 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 click. Oof, I teach, I use Quizlet, Padlet, blah, 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 all the lets. I use, the teacher, I use, I. And then your students, are they learning? They also use it, yeah, but are they learning? Think. Of course, you're going to say, yes, they are. How do you know? Have you asked them? Have you asked them? How do you know? Remember that getting a 20 in the exam or just getting 100% in the computer, in whatever learning management system you're using, doesn't necessarily mean learning is taking place. So going back to active learning, what is active learning? No, it says teaching methods and strategies that involve student participation. It's something that you mentioned. Student participation and engagement, that's different. Participation, yes, when we're teaching, everybody participates, but are they engaged? Engage with the material and engage with the material in a meaningful way? That's more difficult. In a meaningful way, which means, do my students feel that this is something that they are going to use? Now let's talk about trains. Travel by train. No, in Piura, for example, Piura is in the north of Peru, yes, we don't have train. So how can you make it more meaningful to your students? Well, take a picture or find a video, YouTube from in Lima, no? We have the train in Lima. And ask them, how many of you have ever been to Lima? Me, 2, no, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, everybody. Have you seen that train? Yes. Have you jumped onto the train? Have you traveled on the train? No. What color is that train? It may seem something kind of silly asking that sort of thing, but believe me, it's meaningful to them, because the ones who have seen it and then say, okay, now how many have seen that? 2, 3, 4. Okay, get in groups and share that knowledge with your partners. Fostering commitment, because it's me the one, and being responsible for what you're going to say. Or if nobody has ever done it, get them to investigate about Lima train. Or maybe say, have you ever heard, you know that there is a train that is called El Tren Macho in Huancayo, which is Huancayo, Lima? Why is it called El Tren Macho? Investigate. Ask them, what do you think is called the Tren Macho? No, because of this and that. Okay, now for tomorrow, for next class, investigate. Very simple. Don't give them the big homework. No, just, if you just let it open, you're getting your students to be responsible for that, because some of them will look for a big amount of information. Some others will be very short, yes, but then you start getting them in groups, collaborate, share, and then get them to choose the best explanation, write a text, then put them on the board. Then they have to go on walk and the different groups reading whatever they done. And then maybe they can choose the best one, the best presentation. That's active learning. Because they were committed to doing something, they were responsible, they were actively engaged. The teacher was just at the back, checking, guiding them, facilitating, and that's it. No, and the mistakes they make, let them make mistakes. Don't we always say that making mistakes is part of the learning process? Okay, let them make mistakes. And then we start checking. But the first part of the lesson, we know that our students are going to be actively engaged. And maybe then, if it's meaningful, I'm talking about Piura, no? Talking about Piura, where we don't have trains. Sorry, I can ask, where would you like to have a train here in Piura? To go from Piura to Catacaos, to go from Piura to Sullana, or to Huancabamba, or where? And then ask them why. Discuss your ideas. You make it more, I mean, a little bit bigger, go and ask a survey. Ask 10 members of your family, of 10 friends, and then present that survey. Super simple, 1 or 2 questions, no more. They have to create the questions. They have to ask the questions. They have to present. They are actively engaged. Obviously, the teacher facilitates the information. Obviously, the teacher has to be very, very thorough with the instructions he or she is going to give their students. But let them free in that sense. Yes. So that's the idea of active learning. So in other words, active learning uses student engagement to teach. Uses students' learning or students' engagement to teach. Active learning means less lecture time, which means equals less teacher talking time. So if we are the sort of teachers who like talking and talking, I'm sorry, it's like every time I say that, it's like Julio said, I mean, you may be thinking, oh, Julio, now you're doing a lot of teacher talking time. Unfortunately, yes, I am, but this is because of the format of the webinars, you know? But in talking about our classrooms with our young or adolescents or adult students, time yourselves, teachers, time, and make a balance. If you teach an hour or 45 minutes or 40 minutes, out of those 40 minutes, how much did you speak? If it's more than 50%, talk to another teacher, another colleague, and say, how can you time yourself? So if you take like more than half of the class talking and talking and talking, then active learning is not really happening. But if you take like 5 minutes, your students, and then 10 minutes you, and then 5 minutes your students, and 10 minutes you, maybe there is a balance there. Yes. So less teaching, talking time. Less teaching, talking time. Less lecture time should promote student-centered approach. Collaboration, exploration, doing some research in the class. Take them if you have a computer lab, take them to the lab. If you don't, ask for permission so the students can use their mobile phones just for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. If you don't have mobile phones, if your students are, I mean, sometimes we're teaching in places where they don't have connection or they don't have mobile phones or they don't have computers, then think about what they can do. Bring information. And then the students have to read the information. You print out the information. And if you don't have those resources, then read them. No? And then listen and get them to listen and then prepare questions about the topic they're working on. Of course, I'm going to extreme, no? To the extreme, but it happens. We have that sort of teaching learning context. So we have to adapt. And that's why we have to be active teachers. Adapt to the teaching learning context. So we can promote collaboration, we can promote exploration, we can promote research. We can promote learner independence. We can promote learner responsibility. Active learning goes beyond understanding and retention. Active learning goes beyond the understanding of foreign things. And yes, that's it. For you use it for the duration, and since from the beginning of, I don't know, the kind of explanation you give to your students regarding that language point. But it's not just to get them understand and memorize the knowledge. It's to get them use it. Is to use it in their own context. So it's meaningful to them. And they have to use the language. They have to manipulate the language actively. Students, look at those pictures here. So a dad teaching how to drive and a person preparing a ceviche. I don't know how many of you, I suppose most of you have eaten ceviche, yes? But I know how many of you know how to prepare ceviche. You know, the same for learning a car or driving a car, yes? So this is a very practical example of active learning, is how to prepare ceviche or how to drive. You know? You can be given some instructions by your father or mother, or even watch a YouTube video. But just by sitting behind the wheel or combining the ingredients of the ceviche, that you truly learn it. And even, I mean, does that mean that you learn how to prepare a ceviche? Does it mean that you have the skills needed in order to prepare a good ceviche? You need to try. You need to taste it. You need to go into the road if you're learning how to drive and drive. Because just the theory doesn't mean that you learn. The theory doesn't mean that you have the skills and the knowledge to do it yourself. The same happens with English. And that's why sometimes, I don't know how many of you teach in a public school, but sometimes, what is our, because I'm also involved in there, huh? Our typical excuse, no, we have only 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week. And I said, yes, that's true. That's true. But you've had 5 years, 5 years, even with 1 hour. Our students should leave 5th grade of secondary school, if you're teaching a public school, just by saying, hello, my name is Julio Valladares, I'm from Piura, and I am 55 years old, with confidence. That's learning. Super basic, but with confidence. That's our job. That's active learning, because I'm saying something that I need to say. For instance, say, well, I don't speak English very much. Okay, I finished with that. But if we keep on teaching the verb to be and the verb to be, I am, you are, he is, she is, I am, you are, he is, she is, I am, you are, he is, she is. Yeah, they are learning. And the question is, but are they learning? Yes, they are learning, but are they learning? Reflect. Yes, reflect. So that's to be engaged in active learning. If you cut the fish, if you put the right amount of salt, maybe you put too much salt, so it's salty. No, next time I'm going to do it better. I'll put less salt. Active learning. Using foreign things. Okay, you give them the ingredients. Now let them prepare their own foreign things ceviche. Let them ask the questions. Let them prepare the examples. Let them share the examples. Let them correct their own examples. Let them correct their mistakes among themselves. Not you just check. You are just overseeing whatever is going on in your class. And then you, as a summary of your lesson, then you start maybe correcting everybody without mentioning any names. Because if not, you are not actively involving your students in the teaching learning process. So an idea of active learning, no? Remember active learning? You have a student behind the computer, yes, and you have lots of students just looking at the board. And the teacher, the center, in the center. The teacher is the teacher. No? Active learning is collaboration. Yeah, they are investigating, they are doing some research. And as I said before, no, if we don't have those resources, maybe we can bring pictures, write and get some photocopies talking about ceviche, or different ways of preparing ceviche. Okay, student A, student B, student C, and student D. Each of them has a different way of preparing ceviche. Now they have to read it, and they have to, then next class, maybe they have to exchange ideas. Next class, maybe they say, do you think you can change that preparation of ceviche? They can come up with a new idea. And the final idea of this process is they can prepare their own ceviche. I'm talking about the students in Piura, obviously. If you're in a different region of Peru, you can choose their own typical dish. Back to the future.
Yes, Julio, we can hear you.
Now you can hear me. Now, we were talking about active learning. Remember, now I had to rush. No, to me, it was like active learning, because I would say, what am I going to do? What I'm doing here? And I had to rush, and I bring the direct connection. But that happens, no? And I was actively involved in my own webinar here. So active learning also happens in online, now that we have a lot of online teaching learning environment, and we can use now that we also use a lot of hybrid situation, no? Passive learning, for example, we can view a lecture on deadly diseases, for example, no? Active learning is discuss which diseases the students have heard about and in what context. No? So if we're talking about, I don't know, what is a typical basic lesson, which is talking about routines. No, that's a typical, no? So don't just use Peter gets up and at 6 o'clock and then takes a shower and blah, 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 blah. No. Now, what about your dad? What about your mom? What about your sister? What about your brother? Choose one member of your family, because sometimes we don't know the family situation in our students' homes. So we have to be careful. We have to be sympathetic towards that, also towards the students' lives. No? So choose a person in your family you would like to describe the routine. No? You choose the questions you're going to ask. Open. They're responsible for their own learning. Yes, just write 5 questions. 5. Now you choose the question. Now you can give examples. What time do you get up and what do you have for breakfast? But you choose. If you want, and then one of the questions, you have to ask one of the questions, I mean, your personal question to that person. So it's completely open. But maybe you can say, but Julio, I don't know what they're going to say. I haven't taught the present progressive. Forget about that. Because if we think that way, we're restricting our students' creativity. And if you restrict our students' creativity and independence, they cannot be actively engaged in our lessons. Because everybody's going to wait for you, the teacher, to tell them what to do. You know? In passive learning, providing an image of a cell that is already annotated. So provide an unlabeled image of a cell for students to explore and annotate themselves. So they have to write about the cell. They have to write about the cell. That's why if we go back to the initial example, no, let them draw and let them color the fruit. If they want to color a blue banana, let them do it. Ask them later, say, why a blue banana? Have you ever seen a banana blue or a blue banana? Have you ever eaten banana with this color? No. What is the usual color of a banana? Yellow. So that's a reflective dialogue. That's a very simple, clear example of reflective dialogue with a little kid. Basic level. Primary. Now, imagine what you can do with a secondary student with a pre-intermediate level. Imagine if you're teaching advanced level. Passive learning, watching a video. Pay attention, watching a video. Passive learning, it's not like, oh no, but they'll be watching a video without prompts or class discussion after. You just watch the video and just ask questions. The teacher asks questions. The teacher is the one, no. It says engage the students in a simulation that reacts to students' interaction. So maybe when you're watching the video, you stop and say, what do you think Julio shouted at the policeman? And then continue, blah, blah, blah. And stop again. What do you think? What about the sound? Did you hear that sound? What the sound? The sound was about what? I mean, different things. And they should be actively involved in the watching of the video because they know they're going to be asked the question. So they have to be paying attention to every little detail. Sounds. Or maybe just focus on sounds, not dialogue. Or just focus on emotions in the dialogue. Who is angry? In that piece of video. Yes? Who is laughing? Who is shouting? Actively involved. And that's the difference. That's why if you're teaching also online, you have to pay attention. How can I make that learning active? If we just play and they do and they click and the answer, click and the answer, click and the answer, that's passive learning. Yes, you're using online tools and you're a great expert in using online tools, but that's passive learning. Because there is no interaction, there is no involvement. I mean, there is involvement, there is no active involvement. There is no reaction to whatever they are listening or doing or watching or whatever. They just do what they have to do. do what they are told to do. Yes. What is our role in active learning? Do you think it's the same as the role of a teacher in a traditional passive learning class? Definitely, I hope not. In active learning, teaching learning environment, the teacher plays the following roles. Facilitator. They facilitate, they give all the tools. They say, here you are. Now I give you the fish, the salt, the pepper, the onion, and the knife. Now you cut your fish the way you want it to do, the way you have seen on the videos on YouTube, the way you remember from your mother, the way, yeah, why not only watching video, but asking mom how they prepare ceviche, videotape the way mom prepares ceviche, or maybe they go to a restaurant. I say, sir, can I videotape because that's part of my project. Challenger. You have to challenge your students to do better, to do more, to go beyond the typical learning, the typical foreign things and the explanation. So if you're a facilitator, you have to prepare your learners for a self-learning activity, for self-learning. Yes. So what's self-learning? It's an activity, a self-learning activity is an activity that allows students to learn content or figure out answers through the process of doing the activity. So yeah, I'm going to learn the foreign things, but they have to work out the answers. They have to prepare. They have to think about the questions, and they have to pay attention to what my friend, my peer answers. If he answers, I've been here since 4 hours. I said, no, it's not 4, it's 4 hours. Why? And they give the explanation. Maybe the same as the teacher, maybe my own explanation, but they have to figure it out. And they are doing the activity. And then they start asking other peers. Yes. A facilitator doesn't just give answers to students. A facilitator helps the students to learn how to find answers. Helps the students to solve problems on their own. Not the teacher solving the problems, not the teacher giving the answers, not the teacher giving the explanations. That's a facilitator in active learning. Yes. For example, the teacher shows learners pairs of pictures, a big house, a bigger house, a smaller house. Then the teacher asks the student what the new word in the second phrase does. If you're teaching grammar, if you like teaching grammar, so help the students discover the function of the adjective to compare nouns. So a very simple activity, a big house, a bigger house. Maybe you can use pictures. So you not only involve the type of learners, big, small house, smaller house, bigger house, and what is the difference? So they have to work out they are there, and they have then compare in pairs, then in groups. Collaboration. Or maybe that's for homework for next class. So they have to look up in Google or in a grammar book or whatever. What about the teacher being a challenger? So a teacher may challenge students to do a difficult task or overcome obstacles to achieve a goal. How? Just by giving them the tools to do so, not just giving them the answers to everything they ask. The teacher may also challenge views expressed by students and encourage them to justify or support their ideas. He say, no, teacher, the The police is, and maybe I can say the police are. No, teacher, if the police is, why? No, why? And it's like when we ask, for example, the first condition, no? But what happens if I would? I would. No? And everybody said, no, no, because the textbook grammar says that you never put if and would together. Never, Julio. Va de retro, Julio, va de retro. But this is possible to express something different. And instead of me giving them the answers and the explanation, I say, now you find out if I am wrong or right. I'm challenging you to prove me wrong. I'm challenging you to prove me wrong. Or if I put the police is and the police are, both are possible. And maybe you say, no, Julio, no, they are not possible. Okay, why? I challenge you to prove me wrong. Yes, so that's being a challenger in this case. Yes. So a teacher who is a challenger may ask questions such, what steps can you take to perform that task? Maybe you're working on a project. No? What are the main obstacles to solving that problem? How can you overcome them? How can you prove your statement? What facts support your opinion? So promote thinking, promote some reflection. Active learning also involves making your lessons more student-centered. It's an easy step for you or not? Is it an easy step for you to make it more student-centered, or you are on the teacher-centered side? Yes. No. Like it said that in online teaching learning, making your classes student-centered is easy. Do you agree? Everybody thinks, oh, online teaching is easier. Not necessarily. We can use lots of activities, lots of tools, but again, the question remains, is it actively, I mean, your students are actively involved, and is learning taking place as you think it should? Yes. So I'm leaving you with these questions, and I'm going to stop for questions. I don't know if you have any ideas about this presentation, no? Mariela?
Yes,
I can
Julio, I'm
continue.
here. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It was really interesting. Thank you for taking your time to share this, your knowledge with us, dear Julio. Now, we have some questions for you. Yeah, there are a lot of questions, but we select some questions for you. So it's with us, Mrs. Maite. Maite Flores, are you there? Please, can you share the questions with our guest speaker?
Hello, Maite.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, dear Maite.
Hello, good evening. Hello, dear Mr. Valladares. So,
Hi, Maite.
really appreciate your time for this opportunity. And now we have a lot of questions, but I think that the most important of your presentation are
I cannot hear you.
So, in order to develop active learning. So now,
I cannot hear you. Can you repeat, please?
okay. Can you listen to me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. We have some questions. So this question is from Carlos Culipariachi. So how can we apply the whole skills in active learning process?
the 4 skills in active learning, oof, that's a challenge in a way, but I think it's easier to apply the 4 skills when we are dealing with active learning. No? As I said before, I'm going to focus on a grammar point. Yes, the grammar, because for and since. So maybe first we can ask them to read a dialogue, a very short dialogue in which for and since are presented, so they read. Yes, then they have to discuss what's the difference between for and since, that's speaking, yes, and they have to find the rule, the difference. When do you use for and when do you use since? And then they get together and they have to speak and listen to you in a group, for example, to a group of the partners, and then they have to write on a piece of paper, they have to write the explanation of the difference between for and since. No? So based on a grammar point, we've used reading, the reading of a dialogue. Then we use listening, because we've been listening to our peers. We did speaking, because we were speaking while we were listening, yes? And then we did writing. And the writing was before or after the discussion. No? And then it was an active listening, because everybody had to pay attention to what I was saying, for example, and then they were taking notes, and then they react to what I was saying. Maybe they say, I agree with you, or I disagree, I don't think that's correct. And the same goes for the writing. No, they have to read it again, read what I'm writing, and then say, no, this is, why don't we change to this and that, and then start writing again. Read it again, write it again. So that's a very simple way of integrated the 4 skills in an active learning activity. Yes. So is it possible? Yes, it is. In my opinion, I think it's easier to integrate the 4 skills in an active learning activity. Why? Because active learning is connected to collaboration. Yes. And to the learner independence. So they need, yes, the teacher obviously is going to facilitate the information and everything, the tools, what they have to use, but the teacher also can conduct what they have to do. And when the teacher gives the steps to follow, then he can say, okay, here you have to speak, here you have to listen and speak, here you have to read, here you have to read and write. And that's it. No, so that's an idea that I can share with you.
Thank you. And also we generate the independence of our students.
Again?
We have another question. So this question is from Angie Valladares. How can we make grammar lesson more active?
How can we make a
grammar lessons more active?
Interesting, but I've given you, thank you, Angie, thank you, Maite. I've given you an example with for and since, present perfect for and since, but usually a grammar lesson, first we have to think of context. Yes? Whatever language point or grammar point you're going to teach, think of the context, and the context has to be meaningful to the students. If the context is meaningful to students, it will be easier for them to be engaged. And if they are engaged, you can get them to do some active learning. As I said, there's an example there, no? When you say, for example, you're teaching the third person singular, he and she, the verb, yes, and blah, 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 no? So you can write on the board example, no? He gets up, but I get up at 10 o'clock. And my sister's name is Juana, and she gets up at 7 o'clock on Mondays, yes, from Monday to Friday, but I get up, and then I say, my sister and brother, no, get up very late on Saturdays and Sundays, no, but my mom gets up no, very early on Saturday. So I create a content with my mom, my sister. So it's my family. It's my family. So the context is family. Is it meaningful to everybody? I suppose everybody. I don't know. If we are so unlucky that we have a student who doesn't have a family, then you have to be careful. But usually we have a family. Most of us have maybe it could be a large or a small family, but we have a family. We choose the person we want to talk about. And then I ask, what about my sister gets up, but then I get up? Why? And look at it, my brother gets up, and my brother and sister get up, but my mom gets up. What verb are we using? So you ask the students. No? And the students ask, get up, okay. And what is the difference? Is there a difference in the verb? Yes. What is the difference? Get and gets, and why? Now you discuss in your groups. So you get your students in groups or in pairs and then discuss. They think, they read the sentences, they think, and then they share their ideas in pairs. Then they have a rule. So, and they say, okay, what is the rule? The grammar rule. And they tell me the rules. Now, if they tell me the rules, because that's for basic level, if they tell me the rules in Spanish, that's okay. That's okay, because they don't have the language level in order to express that in English. But maybe they can use it in English, a very simple English, no? Get, he, she, okay, and gets he, she, and get with I, they, okay, that's the rule. So you are involving your students into the process of thinking and work it out, the language rule, the grammar, by themselves, on their own. Not you, the teacher, telling them everything. They have to work out the answers. That's one way, to you turn a grammar lesson into an active learning grammar lesson. So is it possible to make a grammar lesson active? Yes. Into active learning lesson? Of course. Yes, it is. But we have to be creative in that sense. No? But I think one idea that I think I always promote, that idea is context. Contextualize. Whatever you're going to teach, whether grammar or vocabulary, contextualize it. Make it meaningful to your students. Make it meaningful to your students. Create context. That's the important thing. Yes. Okay, Maite.
Thank you, Mr. Valladares, but we have two more questions. Raul Guaman says, "Send for your ideas, Mr. Valladares. It has got plenty of advantage for learning, but my question would be, would there be any disadvantage of active learning?"
Yes. Definitely, one of the first things that come to my mind is time. No, we need to invest a bit more of. I mean, part of our teaching learning class. No, we have to invest it in creating that and applying that an activity. No, and using an activity in class, an active learning activity in class. It takes a little bit longer. Definitely, no, because we have to first get your students to either in pairs or in groups or with teacher hold students stand up and work around, and that's I think one of the main disadvantages. Though investing that time later will be a big advantage in terms of the bigger picture. Yes, but yeah, timing. Another point is. For new teachers, no, if you haven't developed your classroom management skills quite well, you may have problems of discipline. Yes, so you also have to pay attention to that. How can I handle before applying an activity where active learning takes place. You have to think about, say, what problems of discipline may arise during this activity. So you have time, you have classroom management problems, possible, especially discipline, yes, because especially if you're teaching secondary students, if they are not used to working these kind of activities, there might be some disruption in the class, and we have to be aware of that. Yes, but that's why I said start by working on active learning just by using 5 minutes of your class, and something that is like unnoticeable. So students get the idea planted in their minds, and little by little will be getting better and better at dealing with these kind of activities. That's what I can say. Now, those are two of the disadvantages that I can see. Now, if you have large groups, that's not a disadvantage. If you have 1 hour a week of class, that's not a disadvantage. Yeah, of course, within the bigger picture is a big disadvantage because we don't have much time. But we can apply some active learning, teaching, learning in our classes, little by little. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Valladares. And the last one. What is the best activity for an active learning?
Oh, the best activity. That's a $1 million question. No, I cannot say that what the best activity is. That depends on the teacher. That depends on the group of students you're working with. That depends on the teaching learning context you have. Because if you teach in a private school with all the resources, that would be easier. And even at that kind of situation, you may have some challenges that you have to overcome. If you teach in a public school with very, very few resources, very few hours, that's a bigger challenge, but still it can be you can use these active learning strategies in your classes. But the best one is the one where your students prove that they have learned, no matter how easy or how difficult. Yes, if they proved that they can work out the difference between using I've been here for 10 years or I've been here since 2012, and they tell you, that's the best proof that active learning works, and that's the best proof that learning has taken place. And if you see that in your students, then that activity is the best activity that you can have and you have done.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Valladares. So now we continue with Ms. Mariela.
Thank you, dear Maite. Thank you, Julio. Please stay with us some minutes more. Please, please, please. We are going to continue with the next part now. So we are going to know what do we have for the next week. Dear Pamela, are you there?
Yeah, Miss, I'm here.
Okay. Share the invitation, please.
Thank you, Miss. Well, good evening, everyone. Well, please don't miss it out. We are going to have a nice and interesting webinar with a well-known trainer, Magister Jesus Nicho, who is going to talk about teaching strategies to develop cross-language connections. That will be delivered next Saturday at 6 p.m. Please don't miss it out, yeah, because we are going to talk about different strategies, but he's not going to be alone. He's going to be accompanied by different teachers, Andres, Ursula, Cristian Ramirez, Jesse Adrian Seng, Luis de la Vega, Sergio Xiang, Miguel Mori, Sharon John Top, Jessica Mendoza, Marilyn Cadillo, Soledad Rivera, Christopher Vera, Carlos Ñaubincopa, and Carla Ledesma. All of them are teachers who work at IPNA, and they are also undergraduate students of the 7th cycle in the Faculty of Education at San Ignacio de Loyola University. So please It's going to be very useful and interesting for us. Don't forget, we have a date next Saturday. And also we are going to have another webinar next Sunday at 6 p.m. too, delivered by Francisco Guamantica and Marta Ogoño. They are going to talk about delivering listening skills in the classroom. Next week, we have 2 dates on Saturday and Sunday. Don't miss these webinars, please. Thank you, Miss Mariela. That's all.
Thank you, dear Pamela. Ya saben, queridos teachers, la próxima semana tenemos 2 webinars. Tenemos el día sábado, el día domingo. Estamos ya a puertas de cerrar todo nuestro ciclo de webinars. Ya son nuestros 3 últimos webinars que vienen, estos 2 y uno más, así que no pierdan ni una sola sesión. Recuerden que con su asistencia a cada sesión ustedes van sumando las horas que va a ir en su constancia de participación y que además por cada sesión también les estamos compartiendo el material provisto por los ponentes, quienes amablemente comparten con nosotros también. Y llegó el momento entonces de dar el exit ticket. Recuerden que deben por favor completar aquí todos sus datos. Es el que ven en pantalla en este momento. Por favor, si nos ayuda Mr. Ortega para fijarlo en el chat de YouTube, va a estar abierto por 15 minutos. Tenemos ahí 2 interesantísimas preguntas propuestas por nuestro ponente del día de hoy, Mr. Valladares, con respecto al tema de hoy. Estoy segura que las vamos a responder efectivamente. Y tenemos aquí el link, lo voy a repetir por si acaso, si es que no pueden acceder desde el chat de YouTube, pueden tomar un pantallazo y digitarlo tal como lo ven en pantalla, https://cutt.ly/ y lo que viene, por favor, tal como lo ven, respetando la mayúscula y minúscula. SPRING en mayúscula, 10, el número 10, y TH en minúscula, Spring 10, TH en minúscula, ¿sí? Y bien, entonces, recuerden completar bien sus datos. Ya les estamos enviando durante estos días los recursos de los 2 últimos webinars también a todos los que han asistido y completado exitosamente su exit ticket. Y bien, vamos ahora ya para la despedida con todo el equipo administrativo de nuestra comunidad English Teachers in Perú. Somos más de 20 docentes situados en diferentes partes del país con un gran corazón, vocación y ganas de poder generar estos espacios de aprendizaje para todos ustedes, queridos colegas, docentes como ustedes, que hacemos posible gracias al apoyo, voy a dejar de compartir aquí, gracias al apoyo de ponentes como el día de hoy. Hemos tenido Julio Valladares, quienes tienen a bien aceptar nuestra invitación, tomar parte de su tiempo, porque sabemos que es una persona con muchas responsabilidades por el cargo que tiene y ocupa, pero con un gran corazón también. El día de hoy ha compartido con nosotros un tema que me ha parecido realmente súper interesante. No quiero dejar pasar el momento, Julito, para compartir algunos saludos que me han estado recordando incluso por el WhatsApp privado de todos los docentes peruanos que han estado conectados, más de 500 docentes y docentes de diferentes partes del mundo. Pamela Chalco, good evening from Yuyuy, Argentina. Elizabeth Tomala, I'm Elizabeth from Ecuador. Celsa Mendoza from Venezuela, México, Paraguay, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, que han estado presentes el día de hoy. Un saludo también de parte de ellos para ti, muy agradecidos todos los maestros que han estado conectados el día de hoy por este interesante tema. Realmente lo vamos a aplicar definitivamente. A veces creo que las estrategias quedan cortas y de repente no fluyen en el momento, y este tipo de capacitaciones hacen que refresquemos de repente lo que empíricamente tal vez conocemos, pero es importante ver más allá de la teoría, las bases, el fundamento de este enfoque como es el Active Learning. Muchísimas gracias, Julito, de todo corazón.
Gracias a ustedes por darme la oportunidad de compartir esto y también de aprender de ustedes. Les agradezco y también les felicito por este esfuerzo que hacen, ¿no? De unir a todos los profesores, que es un sueño de todos nosotros, ¿no? Lo que tenemos en ELT, de unirnos todos, de todo el Perú, y creo que ustedes están dando un gran paso para ello. Los felicito y de verdad que cuenten con mi apoyo, de seguir luego compartiendo algunas otras cosas con ustedes, de verdad. Sé que soy un poco complicado por los tiempos, pero bueno, aquí estamos y de verdad, para adelante. Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias a ti, querido Julio. Te vamos a tomar la palabra por si acaso la sesión
Sí,
está
sí,
siendo
sí.
grabada, está en vivo, ¿no? Es una bromita. Aquí estamos
No,
todos
no, de todas
unidos.
maneras, de verdad, Mariela, de verdad que sí, me interesa mucho porque yo siempre soy un creyente de que en el Perú hay un gran material humano, no me gusta llamarlo material, pero hay un gran equipo humano, pero necesitamos estar unidos, ¿no? Para poder hacer un cambio como se debe hacer en el Perú en lo que es el mundo del teaching of English, ¿no? Y lo están haciendo, así que
Muchísima
felicitaciones.
razón. Y creo que desde estos espacios, pues vamos generando ese cambio y
Sí,
nosotros realmente agradecidos de que aceptes la invitación. De hecho, esperamos volverte a tener en
de
próximos
todas
talleres,
maneras.
eventos o proyectos que tengamos,
Gracias.
porque aprendemos mucho de ti, de toda esa expertise que tienes, de toda esa experiencia. A mis queridos administradores, no sean tímidos, por favor, don't be shy. Turn on your cameras right now. Encendamos las camaritas, ya estamos listos para poder despedirnos el día de hoy de toda la audiencia. Gracias a todos esos maestros que han estado conectados con ustedes el día de hoy. Miss Consuelo Aurora Cáceda, que está por ahí, nuestra querida Consuelito. Miss Jessica Carguavilca, administradora del grupo 2, también en WhatsApp, en Facebook, ahí está ella muy comprometida con su grupo. Miss Pamela Salazar, querida Pamelita, está ahí también con nosotros. Miss Miriam Córdoba, desde la clandestinidad, Miss Miriam se le ve, pero ahí está
The
nuestra
lights
querida
went off in my
ministra.
neighborhood. There is no electricity.
I know that, pero igualito está ahí. Ahí está también Miss Maite Flores, querida Maite, con todos nosotros y por supuesto detrás de toda la conexión, nuestro querido administrador José Ortega. Le damos un fuerte aplauso a Julio Valladares. Con todo el corazón, muchísimas gracias, querido Julio. Llegó el momento de despedirnos. Nos vemos la próxima semana. Bye, bye, English teachers.
Bye, bye. Gracias. Thank you.